All right, guys, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys some personal experience as well as some things that I've learned throughout the last few years that I've been in the tech industry and some things that I would have liked to know before I started, in this field, some good things to know and some good advice in general so that you can be successful and go very, very far in this industry because you can go very, very far. So the learning outcome for this video, because I always like to have a learning outcome, is for people to learn from my mistakes as well as to learn from the mistakes of other people. And so we're going to avoid those mistakes by being aware of what those mistakes or errors are ahead of time and to be constantly evaluating and reflecting on our own behavior so that we can improve. Mistake number one is a lot of new programmers, new engineers, and new developers, new people in tech are afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look dumb. They don't want to appear inadequate because of the types of questions that they are asking. And this is a mistake that I made on my first couple projects. I could have asked way more questions. And I remember having a manager that was so thorough. And he would ask questions like a child in the sense that he would ask and ask and ask and ask. And that is how he got to the level that he's at today, to a managerial level, because he asked the most questions. And so never be afraid to ask questions, because if you don't ask questions, it doesn't stop you from not being able to perform. It only makes your performance look even worse because the people that are, reviewing your work are going to say, well, why didn't you ask? Or why didn't you, ask for help? Or why didn't you ask for questions? In fact, the job that I have now, one of the questions they asked me during the interview was, what do you do when you're working on something and you've been working on something for a long time and you've kind of hit a plateau? How do you get around that? And I told him, I'm not afraid to ask for help. And that's something that somebody that's hiring a developer or engineer is definitely going to look for. So the way that I approach it is just look at your job like the way a child would. A child on average asks at least 300 different questions per day. Now, that doesn't mean you have to ask 300 questions every single day, but you should be asking at least 10 questions or more if you're new to a team or new to a technology, or even if you're just within your first 60 to 90 days. That's the time for you to really get grounded and rooted in the project that you're working on. And that is the time frame that you want to really ask a lot of fundamental and basic questions. And the reason why you have to know how to ask the right questions is that is how you're going to become more creative and more innovative. Because once you know certain things, then you'll be able to do more with that information. So always think about the value that you need from the people that you're working for. You need proper information and you need proper context, and you don't want to make the incorrect assumptions. Incorrect assumptions is something that junior developers do, whereas senior developers are more keen to ask questions and to get clarification constantly as they're working on something. Mistake number two, not testing your code. This is a problem that I can admit that I've had before in the past, and it's something that I still see even to this day. The company that I work for now, one of the lead engineers told me that a lot of people that are working on the team, they find writing tests very difficult. Now, why is that? We're talking about very experienced engineers, people that have a lot of experience, people that have been around a long time, but they still struggle with writing tests. Well, that's because of the way that we are trained as engineers in our standard computer science or computer engineering programs, or if you are self-taught, or if you took a boot camp. They don't really integrate the test-driven development paradigm into the curriculum. So you go through all of this coding, you learn all of these technical terms, and you learn syntax, and you learn all of these things, but your actual process for being productive and quick isn't included. And so the benefits of test-driven development is it allows you to think really, really hard about the behavior that you expect, as well as the design of the code that you're writing. It gives you confidence, which is something that senior developers have a lot more than junior developers, because when you've tested something and you've thoroughly tested it, then you know that your code is going to work and that it doesn't break anything. Also, it takes more time initially to get started because you have to write the test first and then the actual implementation details. But overall, you're going to spend way less time debugging or trying to figure out why your code isn't working. Your overall workflow will be improved because you'll be able to see the holistic applications of what you've written into the application. It won't just be a little box or a little function or a little class that you've written, but it'll be something significant that you'll have confidence in. And the more confident you are, the more problems you'll be able to solve faster, and the more efficient you'll be, and the more valuable you'll be to the people around you. Mistake number 3 is thinking software is all about coding. This is a mistake, again, that I've made. This is a mistake that a lot of new people will make, is just thinking that it's about what you've coded. And this leads into other problems. So this line of thinking is a very slippery slope because you can start thinking about quantity and not necessarily quality. And your job is to understand the users, whether it's the front end users or the business users or the stakeholders. You're always concerned about understanding what the problem is and how to solve that problem. And over time, you're going to go through a lot of ups and downs because users don't always know what they want. When you start a project, it's not going to be in black and white, everything that you need to do and how you need to do it. It's going to involve you engaging deeply mentally with the process of design, the process of developing, the process of getting feedback, the process of refactoring, the process of improving. And so you're not going to always know ahead of time. You're going to have to get comfortable with uncertainty. And to give you an example of this, I wanted to show you 2 real job descriptions that I've gotten through email. So here's an email that I got about a job, and this is for some senior React developers. And they said, hey, these are our must-haves. This is what you absolutely have to have. These are the concepts and tools that you have to have: React, JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. Know how to compile Node.js, know how to do unit testing, any framework. They use Mockito, and also have a little bit of DevOps and CI/CD experience with Kubernetes and Docker. Some of their nice to haves was Angular and TypeScript and interactive visualizations. So based on this job description, you know there's about 5 or 6 different tools that you're going to have to use, but it doesn't really tell you more than that because anybody can know some of these tools, but the job itself is not to be the master user of tools. It's to be the master problem solver. So here's a much better, much more detailed job description that I received. And I want to go towards the bottom. So it says here that you are ambitious, dedicated, hardworking, and can work on your own initiative while also working collaboratively and deliver on time with a high level of integrity, a sense of urgency, attention to detail, and attention to quality. That is describing the type of person that they're looking for, right? Because just because you have the technical skills, that's not it. The job is not just about your technical skills. And this goes back to one of the other mistakes that people make is they think that it's all about, the code that you write, or they think that it's all about speed and how fast you can write something. But this right here shows you that you have to be a different kind of person to be successful at this job. You need to have strong understanding of the fundamentals, strong understanding of design patterns, strong understanding of data structures, demonstrable experience of refining ambiguous business requirements and mapping them into a design document. So if you read this job description, it'll really help you see that this person's job is not just to write code, but it's also to refine, to give clarity, to solve problems, and to take initiative and to collaborate as well as work on their own. And that's really a great summary of what you should expect if you are just getting into programming or if you're a junior programmer. You are not just a programmer. Your job is a bridge between business and technology. And understanding that vital bridge between those two things will definitely help you understand how to excel at whatever job you're doing. Mistake number 4, trying to code too fast. So one time I had an interview with a company and they asked me to reverse a string. And this sounds like something simple, but in my mind, I thought I was being clever by writing a lot of code quickly, Googling a lot of different solutions and implementing them quickly. And at the end of the conversation, the hiring manager reminded me that this was a communication exercise and not a technical exercise, right? So, trying to code too fast will lead you nowhere. Yes, you will be moving fast, but where will you be moving? And it kind of reminds me of this concept in physics that talks about velocity and speed. So we know speed is the measure of distance over time, but velocity is a measure of the change in speed over the change in time. And also, it gives a unit of direction. So when you think about direction, coding is like a marathon. It's not just something you write and then you're just done with it. It's not like a paper that you've written, years ago in college. It's going to be a living piece of writing. It's almost like when you are writing, something in college, and you have to start off with a rough draft. Then you have to do another rough draft and edit it and improve it. You have to do some more editing, and then you submit a final draft. And then once you submit a final draft, you continuously improve that. And that's kind of like the idea of velocity being more important than speed that I'm trying to get here, is that I've made this mistake so many times that I'm so concerned about speed. I'm not thinking about my process. I'm not thinking about, have I really tested what I've written? Have I really thought about the design of what I've written? And have I really thought about how to optimize the solution that I've came up with? Mistake number 5 is not understanding the problem that you're trying to solve and the solution, right? Because if you don't understand the problem, then you can't understand the solution, and vice versa. And so there's an entire domain of problems that existed before you joined this company. And you have to take the time to actually understand that. It's not something you're going to understand in a day or a week or a month. But after working with a group of people on a certain set of problems for a nice amount of time, a couple months, that problem domain should become very familiar to you. And then it's like you're starting to solve more and more similar problems, and then you get better and faster. And that's the way you want to go. You want to not just come out, like a lot of people say, just hit the ground running. You don't want to hit the ground running. You want to have endurance. You want to be there for the long run. And to be there for the long run, you have to understand the problem solution. And so the problem and solution domain are provided by different issues that you come up with on a daily basis. And you just have to take those business problems and then translate them into technical solutions. And that's really your job. And it maps perfectly to exact targets. Like literally, whatever the problem is, you want to come up with the best possible solution. And to understand that, you can find similar problems and then modify the solution that you come up with so that it fits on target with that specific case or that specific input problem that you're trying to fix. Mistake number 6 is not understanding the architecture. So there was a particular project that I worked on where they spent weeks explaining the architecture to us. And this is what they did in the beginning of our training, because this was a totally new kind of position, right? So they really, really made sure that we went over the architecture over and over and over again. And I didn't really pay as much of attention as I should have, because, I was more so just ready to code. But again, when you have a strong understanding of the architecture, it makes problem solving and writing code so much easier. And so take the time to look at the architecture diagrams. Or if you're joining a project, try to create your own, just for fun, and say, look, this is how I can demonstrate my understanding of the application. And the people that can do these kind of things, that can visually present complex, ambiguous computer systems and how they communicate with each other, your value to the company is going to be so much greater, because they're not just going to look at you as an engineer, but they'll also look at you as some sort of like future leader or future manager. Mistake number 7 is not getting better. This happens so often in programming, where we learn a particular tool or language, and it's so hard in the beginning to learn it and get comfortable with it that the idea becomes religious in itself. We just stay with what we've always known and what we've always done. And that's not how you want to think if you are an engineer. An engineer's job is to innovate to take it to the next level. And to do that, you have to always be learning. And that brings me to mistake number 8 is learning how to learn quickly. Study long, study wrong. You don't have to practice for 16 hours a day to become a great developer. But you do need to practice in a way that's optimized so that you're practicing the right things and practicing within a confined amount of time so that it doesn't take you that long to figure out where you stand. I think a lot of people make this mistake because they get caught up in doing tutorial after tutorial after tutorial, or they get caught up in YouTube video after YouTube video after YouTube video. Well, there's nothing wrong with having tutorials and doing things like that, but it's only going to take you so far. Mistake number 9 is take time to be a team player. Take time to get to know people on your team. Take 30 minutes and get to know them. Ask them what type of problems they've run into before. Ask them how they got around those problems. Ask them what advice they would give a newcomer. Really, really make yourself a part of a team. Managers and leaders notice people that are team players very early. And if it just appears that you're, not really engaged, they will notice that and they will say something to you about it. I mean, my manager on a project told me that. He said I was too laid back. I wasn't asking enough questions. I wasn't showing enough interest. And from that conversation, I've always learned that managers are paying attention to things like that. And the last thing that I want to add to this video is that as an engineer, don't be afraid of feedback. Don't be afraid of constructive criticism. Don't be afraid of doing something wrong. Don't be afraid of looking like you don't know what you're doing, because that's a part of the process of learning. And children don't have that issue because they've become very comfortable with the learning process. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned something from it. And I hope that you gained something from this and you will use this to further yourself. So with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.